Hola mis amigas, Careena. Welcome back to Careena's Adventures. This week is going to be my second video in a three-part series about the three acts of your story. This week is Act 2, the middle of your story, what it is, what it should include, and also how you can fix a saggy middle if it feels like it's falling flat. Act 2 is pretty much everything roughly between the post-inciting incident call to action to the pre-climax build-up. This should include lots of smaller points of conflict gradually getting more intense and hitting close to home that are not only the outer conflict of what's going on around your main character and building up to the outer conflict of the climax, but also the inner conflict and the struggle your main character is having with their false belief. Throughout this time, you're basically also going to be doing more backstory revealing if that's something your story requires, or more explanation of the world building to the readers. Quick correction to last week's video, I mentioned world building like it was something you would be doing while you're going through and writing your book. What I meant to say was that you would be world building kind of from your reader's perspective, building the world for them, like in their eyes, but you probably should have at least done some preliminary world building before you started writing the story. Just a side note and some advice. During this time, you also, of course, will be introducing probably a large number of your side characters. They will have their own side arcs developing, and your side characters may well have their entire arc develop during the Act 2 of your story. They won't necessarily develop and change at the same rate and the same timing as your main character, which is okay and can add a lot of layers and depth and influence to your story. Your side characters can also change after your main character does. It's just what's best for the story and what will balance it the best. So your Act 2 should ultimately end kind of just before the build up to the climax, maybe just before your main character realizes what exactly they're going to have to do to save the world, for the lack of a better term. I mean, it might not be that extreme, but it should end with them realizing their false belief, realizing that the truth, that it's not true, realizing the truth, and going off of that confidence and being ready to do what they need to do in the climax, which will be next week's video. And in other words, the truth will set you free. So, continuing my example from last week's video of finding Dory, during Act 2, it's basically everything between the deciding they're gonna cross the ocean and go to California to just before the truck scene, kind of right after. Well, I mean, this is, if you haven't seen the movie yet, you probably should go watch it before you listen to this part, because I'm probably going to give away a lot of stuff because I'm trying to explain the plot stuff here, so please excuse me and skip this if you would like to. But it basically goes from when they're crossing the ocean to California to just before the truck scene, right after Dory meets her parents. So yeah, minor spoiler alert, but during this time, there is so much going on. Dory gets captured by the humans and taken to the Marine Life Institute. She meets Hank, who is the octopus. Well, technically he's a septopus, excuse my fan moment. But she meets him, who I would probably consider him the main side character of this story. That could be a biased opinion because he's also one of my favorite characters in the movie, but probably one of the main side characters. And then you also have other side characters throughout the story that have their own arcs. I'm specifically going to be focusing on Hank and Marlon as the side character arcs because I feel like they're the most obvious. But throughout this time, you have those character arcs developing. You have Dory having lots of little points where she has to lead, overcome her insecurity, and also overcome her short-term memory loss to some degree, and get in the driver's seat and lead even whenever other people are doubting her and not always being very kind to her. And so she even reaches a point where she is directly challenging Hank, the septopus, with his false belief, challenging him to change too, which is a big point in her character. And when you're watching the movie, it just kind of seems like something Dory would do. But then when you get it down to a story level, you're like, wow, she's really getting more confident and really not being as afraid of her insecurities anymore. So you're seeing how she is growing more confident. Now, she does fail sometimes, which Act 2 is kind of a delicate balance of win and fail and win and fail. And keeping your character just like kind of confident enough to keep going, but at the same time they're kind of struggling with what they're going through. And then of course it ends with her, Act 2 ends with Dory finding her parents and realizing that she is not less valuable for her memory problem, but she is capable and confident and special in her own way. And that ultimately gives her the confidence that she needs. As a side note, the side character Marlon, who was one of the main characters, or probably the main character from the first movie, has his arc, in my opinion, pretty much complete during this Act 2, in the scene where he kind of he stops and thanks Dory for what she's done, which kind of, he's been ungrateful and not always very kind to her throughout the film and not appreciative of who she is. And so that's kind of his completion of his arc in realizing, you know, how grateful he is to have her, and kind of not laying down his pride, but just taking the time to see that and make that right. And that is kind of well before the climax. Now, Hank's arc doesn't really complete until a little bit later, so I'll save that for the next video. And again, I apologize if you haven't seen the movie. I warned you to skip because I'm spoiling a lot of things. Go watch the movie. I really liked it. So, to the issue of fixing a saggy middle, like a flat middle to your story where it's just boring, it's like, oh yeah, we're just kind of walking along here, nothing exciting is really happening, let's just, yeah, great. Oh, some bad things happened over here, but now we're good again. It's just kind of the same thing happening over and over, if you will. So, basically, my two don'ts for this issue, to help you avoid this issue, is number one, don't include issues in the story or scenes in the story that aren't relevant. Basically, as you're outlining or later as you're looking back or editing, ask yourself if the scene contributes to the character's journey, gives us information about the conflict or some other information that we will need later, or ultimately reveals something about the character to us. If not, it's probably a saggy scene and should be cut. Now, if it still feels saggy and kind of just blah, even though maybe there are one or two pieces of information that you do need, maybe consider how you could put those one or two pieces of information in a different scene, maybe even a different scene that also only had one or two pieces of information, to just kind of be more concise and include that information but in a less boring way. The second don't is, don't have a character jump ahead or fall back in their journey for no apparent reason. Let them fail and let them grow, but make them earn it. Don't just have them feel beat up about themselves or feel suddenly confident without something having happened to make them feel that way. And also try to make it a little bit consistent. Like, obviously it is a roller coaster, but what you don't probably want to do is have where, like, this is the beginning of the story and this is the end, and like at the beginning they've already made like a ton of progress, and then all of a sudden they crash and burn, and then it's kind of like a little bit of progress, and then at the end, like, oh, all of a sudden everything's better again. You probably want to have it like, you know, this, and then the inciting incident kind of challenges them, and then throughout the story they're probably doing this and gradually getting more confident and failing a little bit more each time, until ultimately, once you get to the climax, you're probably going to do more like this, a little higher. So, if that makes any sense. Basically, try to make it a noticeable improvement while still also raising the stakes and having them fail, and not having them be like too fixed up front in the story, and then it's like, well, I don't need to read the rest of the book because they already conquered their challenge. So I hope that this helps you and you have an idea on how to build a strong middle for your story. If you have any other suggestions, or you feel like there's something that I've left out, do let me know down in the comments, and be sure to subscribe so that you can see the last video coming out about the climax, the Act 3 of your story, that will be coming out next week. Alright, adios mis amigas y Dios te bendiga. Have a blessed day and happy writing.